She was telling me about the movie they were watching. Kelsey had picked it, she said, some thriller with the actor whose name she could never remember, and it wasn't that good, but they'd opened a second bottle of wine, so they were committed at that point. She laughed at her own sentence the way she laughed when she was relaxed and comfortable. That specific laugh I'd heard 1,000 times in 2 years, and I was lying on the couch in our apartment listening to her voice, and I opened Find My Friends for no particular reason. The same thoughtless reflex as checking the weather, the mindless scroll of someone with a phone in their hand who is technically doing something else. The pin was not at Kelsey's house. The pin was at an address on Riverside Drive that I recognized as being in the Riverview neighborhood, about 4 miles from Kelsey's place in Brookside, on the complete opposite side of the river. I lay there on the couch, and I looked at the pin and I listened to her describe a movie she was not watching, at a house she was not in, next to a friend she was not with. I kept my voice completely level for the rest of the call. I said goodnight. I put the phone face down on my chest, and I stared at the ceiling of our apartment for a long time. I work in emergency medicine. I have spent 14 years learning to stay calm when everything is going wrong at once. I have been in rooms where people were dying and kept my voice level and my hands steady and made the right calls under conditions that would make most people freeze. I know how to hold it together when holding it together is the only option. I held it together. I did not sleep. My name is Troy. I'm 43 years old. I'm an ER nurse at a Level 2 trauma center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Have been for 14 years, which means I've been doing this long enough that I've seen most of what a human body can survive and quite a bit of what it can't, and I still choose to come back because the work matters in a way that I haven't been able to walk away from regardless of how exhausted or beaten down any given stretch leaves me. It's not an easy job, and it doesn't pretend to be, and I've learned to respect the people who last in it and to not judge the ones who don't. Her name is Serena. She's 38, works as an events coordinator at the Tulsa Club Hotel downtown, manages the banquet and conference calendar, coordinates with vendors and catering, handles the logistics of making other people's important occasions run smoothly. She's been doing it for 8 years, and she's genuinely good at it, with the specific competence of someone who has learned through repetition and genuine care that the difference between a good event and a great one is usually about 10 small decisions made early enough in the process that nobody notices them being made. She has an eye for the invisible seams, the things that need to be handled before they need to be handled. We met in January 2022 at a fundraising dinner at the hotel where she worked. I was there with a group of colleagues from the hospital, a charity gala for pediatric care that the hospital supported annually. One of those events where you're at a table with people you know and the room is full of people you don't. And I'd wandered to the bar and found her there during a lull between her coordination duties, visibly exhaling after some logistical thing had been handled. I asked if everything was okay. She said, "It is now." Ask me in 45 minutes, and the answer might be different. I asked her in 45 minutes. The answer was still okay. We talked until the event started winding down, and she had to go back to being the person who makes sure the lighting rigs get packed up correctly. I got her number. We had coffee the following week at a place on Peoria Avenue in Brookside, the kind of neighborhood coffee shop that's been there long enough to have its own gravity, and we talked for 3 hours and closed the place down, which I took as a good sign and which turned out to be correct. We were, from the first few weeks, the kind of couple that made sense, same general relationship with the world, same dry humor, same comfort with silence when silence was the right thing. She moved into my apartment on Denver Avenue 14 months into us dating, which felt natural and not rushed, and we'd been in the same space for 14 months after that, 28 months total, almost 3 years of this being the central fact of my daily life. Serena is close with her friends, Kelsey especially, who she'd known since college and who lived in Brookside and who was a genuine, established presence in her life and in mine. I liked Kelsey. I'd been to dinner with her and her husband maybe 10 times over 2 years. Kelsey and Serena had their regular nights, a Wednesday or Thursday every couple of weeks, wine and a movie or a walk along the river trail, the ordinary maintenance of a long friendship. I'd never questioned these nights. I'd had no reason to. My flaw, and Serena had pointed this out to me gently across 2 years, the way she pointed out difficult things, which was with care and without weaponizing it, is that I compartmentalize. It's a skill that keeps me functional in the ER, and it's a liability at home. I can put a thing in a box, label the box, set it on a shelf, and not go back to it. This is useful when the thing in the box is the memory of a bad outcome on a shift that I can't afford to carry into the next one. It is less useful when the thing in the box is an unresolved tension in a relationship that needs to be dealt with rather than shelved. Serena had said once that she could see the shelves in my eyes when I was doing it, the particular look of someone who had decided not to feel something yet. I'd heard her. I tried to take things off the shelf more often. I'd managed it imperfectly. What I'm telling you is that I'd been noticing things for months that I'd been putting in boxes. And on a Friday evening in November, lying on my couch with a phone in my hand, the boxes came open all at once. The first thing I noticed was in July. Serena mentioned a name, Dominic, in the context of a wellness program the hotel had started offering for corporate conference clients. A lot of hotels do these now, apparently. They partner with a local wellness provider to offer yoga sessions or guided meditation or personal training as an add-on for corporate groups who want a team-building angle. The hotel had engaged a wellness company, and Dominic Reyes was the primary instructor who came in to run the sessions. She mentioned him in passing. The new wellness person seems good. The corporate clients liked the last session. I registered the name and moved on. In August, she mentioned him again, this time with more texture. He'd apparently been asked to do a monthly session for hotel staff as well, a perk the management had decided to extend internally, and Serena had attended a couple of them. She said he was good at what he did, that the sessions were actually useful and not the usual corporate wellness performance. Dominic had moved to Tulsa from Denver about 18 months ago, she mentioned. Rebuilt his practice after going through a divorce, was apparently doing well. I thought, interesting, good for him, and I went back to whatever I was doing. What I notice now, looking back, is that the second mention had a quality the first one didn't. The first was a professional reference. The second was a character sketch. The difference between knowing someone's name and knowing their backstory is the difference between a passing acquaintance and someone you've been paying attention to, and I filed that difference in a box and put it on the shelf. September was the month the Wednesday evenings with Kelsey became more frequent. Not dramatically so. There'd always been variation, sometimes twice in a month, sometimes not for 3 weeks. But in September, Serena went to Kelsey's 3 times, which was on the higher end of the usual range, and she came home from each of them in a particular way that I noticed and then boxed and shelved. The quality I noticed was hard to name exactly. Not happiness. More like the kind of aliveness that comes from something engaging that you're not ready to talk about. I told myself she and Kelsey were going through something together, some sustained conversation about a thing in Kelsey's life that was taking multiple evenings to work through, and that was almost certainly what it was. In October, the phone shifted. I'll say this briefly because I know the phone behavior is a pattern in every story like this, and it's still true. Serena had always been easy with her phone around me. Not performatively transparent, just casually present. Phone on the counter, phone face up on the coffee table, answered texts in the same room without thinking about it. In October, the phone started having edges. Small ones. The kind you only detect after years of knowing someone's relationship with their own devices. I detected them and I boxed them and I put them on the shelf with the other things. There was a specific October evening that crystallized the period for me. We were at the kitchen table after dinner. I'd made something, I don't remember what, something that required the table to be cleared of the accumulated clutter before we could eat. And she was looking at her phone while I was cleaning up, and she was smiling at it. Not a big smile, just a quiet one. The private kind. I was standing at the sink with my back to her, and I saw it reflected in the dark window above the sink, the faint mirror the glass makes at night. I saw the smile. I turned around, and she was already looking at something else, and the smile was gone. I turned back to the sink and finished the dishes. I am telling you that I saw that reflection, recognized it for what it was, and chose to put it in a box and not go back to it. And that choice is the thing I have to live with. November arrived, and I was still shelving. I was also, underneath the shelving, running a parallel track that I was aware of but not acting on, a low-level inventory of the accumulation, a constant background process. The late evenings, the phone, the name that had arrived with texture in August, the Kelsey nights that were running high. I was building the case that I'd been refusing to build, running it on a background thread while the foreground thread managed my job and my life, and the ordinary Tuesday texture of a 2-year relationship. I work 12-hour shifts in a trauma bay. I have learned, out of professional necessity, to hold several things in my mind simultaneously and to assign each one the appropriate level of attention based on urgency and available bandwidth. I had assigned the background thread the lowest available urgency setting, and it had been running on minimal resources for 4 months. The specific mundane moment. I was driving home from a night shift on a Wednesday morning in early November, the kind of drive that happens on autopilot after 12 hours of a particular kind of intensity. The dawn coming up over the Broken Arrow Expressway in that flat Oklahoma way that's either beautiful or bleak, depending on how the shift went. I was tired in the specific way of someone who has held a lot together for 12 hours and is now letting the tension out in increments. And I was thinking about Serena. Thinking about the smile in the window and the phone and Dominic's backstory and 3 Kelsey evenings in September. Thinking about all of it for the first time without immediately boxing it. I let it run. I sat with the fully assembled version of what I'd been keeping in pieces. I thought, I need to ask her directly. I need to come home and sleep and then have an actual conversation instead of shelving things that need to be addressed. I came home. Serena was still asleep. I crawled in beside her and I slept. And when I woke up, she was making coffee and she brought me a cup without being asked, the way she always did. And I looked at her in the morning light of our kitchen and I thought, I'm going to say something tonight. I didn't say something that night, or the next night, or the one after that. I was still deciding when the Friday call happened. The Friday was November 14th. I know the date because it's in my phone and because I've looked at it enough times that it's the kind of thing you know now. Serena had texted at 6 that she was heading to Kelsey's. Just the usual heads up she always sent, the informational text of someone in a long relationship who has established the habit of basic communication. I texted back, okay, have fun. I'd probably be asleep by the time she got home. She sent back a heart. The ordinary shorthand of 2 people who had been together long enough to compress a lot into small things. I ate alone and watched something I don't remember and fell asleep on the couch around 9, which is what happens when you're a trauma nurse 3 days out from a run of long shifts. She called at 10:15. Just checking in, she said. She knew I'd probably be awake because I always claimed I was going to sleep early and then wasn't. That specific note of affectionate accuracy, the way partners accumulate knowing each other. I said I'd been dozing. I was awake now. She sounded warm and present, and she was telling me about the movie and the second bottle of wine and the actor whose name she could never remember. My phone was in my hand. I wasn't doing anything in particular with it, just holding it the way you hold your phone when the other hand is holding the phone you're talking on, the reflexive double-device situation of the modern human. I opened Find My Friends the way you open any app that lives on your home screen from sheer motor memory, not intention. The app loaded. I looked at the map. The pin was not at Kelsey's address on East 35th Street in Brookside. The pin was on Riverside Drive. I knew Riverside Drive because I'd driven it hundreds of times. It runs along the Arkansas River on the East Bank. Beautiful stretch of road. The kind of address that means a newer apartment building or a house with a view of the water. Nice part of town. Not Brookside. For miles from Brookside. I looked at the pin. She was saying something about the actor. She thought he might be British, but she wasn't sure. And I was looking at a GPS location that was not where her voice was pretending to be. I thought, with the specific clarity of someone whose brain has just had 4 months of boxed information simultaneously unpacked, she is not at Kelsey's house. And I thought, with the secondary clarity of the next thing after that, she has been doing this for longer than tonight. I said, what's the movie called? She told me. I said, I think I've seen that one. I hadn't. I had no idea. I just needed to keep her talking while I looked at the pin and understood what I was looking at. We talked for another 4 minutes. I said I was going back to sleep. She said she'd try not to wake me when she came home. I said, okay, good night. She said, good night, and I love you. The automatic close of 1,000 calls before this one. And I said it back because the words were already in my mouth before I'd processed that I was saying them. I put the phone down. I looked at the ceiling. I thought about the distance between Riverside Drive and Kelsey's house in Brookside. About 4 miles. About 8 minutes in light traffic. Far enough that it wasn't a wrong pin. Far enough to mean somewhere specific. I stayed on the couch and I didn't sleep, and at 12:47 I heard her key in the lock and I heard her come in quietly the way she always came in late, try not to wake me. And I heard her go to the bathroom and brush her teeth, and I heard her get into bed. And I lay on the couch and I stared at the ceiling and I let her think I was asleep because I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not at 12:47. In the morning, I got up and I made coffee. Serena got up 20 minutes later and came to the kitchen still in her pajamas, and I handed her a cup, and she said good morning and kissed my cheek and sat at the table, and I sat across from her, and I opened Find My Friends on my phone, and I set it on the table between us with the location history visible. I had this open when you called last night, I said. She looked at the phone. That's not Kelsey's address. She looked at it for a long time. She didn't look at me. She looked at the pin on the screen, and something moved through her face that I watched with a stillness I can only attribute to 14 years of emergency medicine. Troy. Riverside Drive, I said. I looked it up. I know the general area. She set her coffee cup down. She looked at her hands. How long? I said. I don't. She shook her head. I didn't know you had that app. We set it up together when you had your car broken into last year, so we could find each other if something happened. She closed her eyes. A long exhale. How long, Serena? Since September. Said to the table. September. The 3 Kelsey evenings in September. The texture shift in August when she told me his backstory. The smile in the kitchen window. Is it Dominic? She looked up. Her eyes were wet. Yes. Just that. Yes. The wellness instructor from the hotel. Yes. I looked at the kitchen. The kitchen she'd reorganized when she moved in, the specific configuration of things she'd arranged and that I'd adopted without thinking about it because her arrangement was better. Her coffee cup on the table. The way the morning light came in on this particular day. How many of the Kelsey nights? I said. She pressed her lips together. A lot of them. Not all. Kelsey doesn't. She stopped. Kelsey doesn't know. I told her I was homesick a couple of the times. So Kelsey wasn't covering for you? No. She shook her head. Kelsey has no idea. I thought about that. About the specific architecture of it. The nights that were real Kelsey nights and the nights that weren't. The whole sustained construction of plausibility. Is he single? I said. He's divorced. Has been for 2 years. Does he know about me? She looked at the table. Yes. Does he know you live with me? Yes. And he was okay with that. Something moved through her face. He said he wasn't. He said he wanted it to. She stopped. He said he wanted things to be different. Different how? He wanted me to tell you. She said it carefully. He said that more than once. He said he didn't want to be. She stopped. He wanted to not be the other person. I said. Yes. I sat with that for a moment. Dominic Reyes, who had moved from Denver and rebuilt after his own marriage ended, who apparently had principles about not wanting to be the hidden thing in someone else's relationship and had been the hidden thing anyway for 3 months. That tension is its own story and it's not mine to tell, but I've thought about it. Are you in love with him? I said. The silence lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Serena, I don't know how to answer that in a way that's, she shook her head. Something that feels like, she stopped. She looked at me then, really looked at me, the way she looked at me in the early months when she was still deciding something. I don't want to say yes and have that be the only thing you hear, but I can't say no and have that be true. I breathed through that. So yes, I said. She didn't say anything. I need you to be somewhere else today, I said. I need to be in this apartment alone. Okay. She said it quickly, without arguing, which told me she'd been preparing for this in some form, that this conversation had existed in her mind already and she knew what her part of it required. I need you to call Kelsey and go there. The real there. Okay. And I need you to tell her the truth about why you're coming. I'm not doing that for you. She nodded. She was crying quietly, the specific quality of someone who has been holding a thing for long enough that the release, when it finally comes, arrives with its own kind of relief under the grief. I recognized that quality. I'd seen it in the ER, the strange coexistence of relief and devastation when the truth of something finally lands. She packed a bag. She was at the door with it, and she stopped and she said, I know there's nothing I can say right now. I know that. I just want you to know that the 2 years were real. All of it. That's real. I looked at her. I didn't say anything. She left. I sat in the apartment until noon. Then I called my friend Marcus. Different Marcus, my colleague from the hospital, who'd known me for 9 years. And he came over and we sat on my couch and I told him everything and he said, How are you still that calm? And I said, I don't know. Check back in a few days. I'm writing this 5 days later. He checked back. The answer is I'm not, particularly, but I've got better tools for non-com than most people and I'm using them. I said I'd update. Here I am. A lot of people responded to the original post and I read through most of it across several nights. Some of it was useful. Some of it was people processing their own situations through mine, which I understand. This kind of post becomes a container for what readers are carrying, and I don't begrudge anyone that. One person wrote, "The detail about saying, 'I love you' back on autopilot before you'd processed what you were saying is the most human thing in this whole post. And I've thought about that comment more than any other because it's accurate, and because I've been sitting with what it means that the words came out anyway, whether that's muscle memory or something else, and I don't have a clean answer." Here's what happened. Serena moved to Kelsey's house 19 days ago. Kelsey's response to being told the full story, which Serena apparently did tell her that day, as I'd asked, was, from what I've heard secondhand, a mix of shock and a specific kind of grief for the role she'd unknowingly played. She didn't know she'd been used as cover. She'd thought she and Serena were having a normal stretch of their friendship, and finding out that some of those evenings had been fabricated apparently hit her harder than the situation itself in some ways. She still took Serena in, because Kelsey is that kind of person, but from what I understand, the friendship is going through its own repair process separate from mine and Serena's. The apartment on Denver Avenue is mine. The lease has always been in my name. Serena moved in 14 months ago. Her name is not on anything. That's the practical reality of the housing situation, and it's at least uncomplicated, which is more than I can say for most of the rest of it. I told Marcus that night, as I said. He's been present in the specific way of someone who knows you well enough to know what presence looks like for you specifically, which in my case means mostly just showing up and not requiring me to perform okayness. He came over twice the first week, and we watched things I don't remember, and he didn't ask how I was feeling more than once per visit, which is the correct frequency. I told my sister Diane the following weekend. She's 46, lives in Oklahoma City, and she drove up on a Saturday, because that's what Diane does when things are serious. She shows up physically, which is a quality I've always respected and that I needed more than I knew. She spent the day and we talked, and she made a point that I've been turning over since. You put things in boxes because you've had to. The job requires it. But Serena isn't a patient, and this isn't a shift, and the boxes don't help you here. She said it without judgment. It still landed. I have not told my parents yet. My mother would want to fix it, and my father would be quiet in a way that would require more management than I have capacity for right now. I'll tell them when I know more about what there is to tell. Serena's family situation is her business, and I've stayed out of it. Her mother, who lives in Tulsa and who I'd met probably 20 times and who had always been warm to me, sent me a brief text about 10 days in. Just 3 sentences, careful and kind, saying she was sorry and that she hoped I was okay. I texted back that I appreciated it. We left it there. The complication nobody saw coming. Dominic Reyes reached out to me directly. I want to be careful about how I describe this because I've been careful about how I think about it. He sent me a message through Instagram, public profile, easy to find, about 12 days after everything came out. He said he'd known about me from the beginning, that he'd pushed Serena to tell me, that he hadn't been comfortable with the situation and had ended things from his side when he realized she wasn't going to be honest with me on her own timeline. He said he was telling me this not to ask for anything, but because he thought I deserved to know that someone in the situation had wanted the truth to come out. I read this message several times. I thought about Serena saying he'd wanted things to be different, that he'd said he didn't want to be the hidden thing. And I thought about the GPS pin on Riverside Drive and the 3 months it had taken for any version of the truth to reach me, including his version. I haven't responded. I've thought about responding, and I've decided not to, at least not yet, because I don't know what I'd say that would serve any purpose I can currently identify. He's 36. He rebuilt something after his marriage ended. He made a choice and apparently had discomfort with his choice, and is now doing something about the discomfort. Those are human facts. They don't change what I'm living with, but they're not nothing, and I've been trying to hold them as what they are rather than as what they aren't. The mutual friends situation is the usual spread. A few have gone quiet in the way people go quiet when they're not sure whose team they're supposed to be on. A few have been specifically present. My colleague Dr. Amanda Park, who has been at the hospital for 6 years and who is one of the more direct people I know, said to me during a shift break about a week in, "I don't know what's going on in your life, but you need to eat more and sleep more, and if you want to tell me about it, you can." I told her the outline during the next break. She listened, nodded twice, and said, "Okay. What do you need?" Which is apparently the right question that everyone who knows me has learned to ask. The inside of it. The first morning I woke up in the apartment fully alone. Not just Serena at Kelsey's for the night, but actually gone. Her things cleared out. The geography of the apartment changed by the absences. I lay there and ran the boot sequence. What day? What shift? And then the weight of the previous week arrived in the order it's been arriving every morning since. The apartment sounds different with one person in it. I know that's not a unique observation, but it's a specific truth. The ambient texture of a space is different when the ratio changes, and I've been noticing it every morning at the threshold of full wakefulness, before I decide what to do with it. She left a cardigan on the hook by the door. Not intentionally. She missed it, just one thing among the logistics of moving quickly, and it's been on the hook for 3 weeks because I walk past it every day and don't take it down. I'm aware this is irrational. I've given myself permission to be irrational about the cardigan for a while longer. There's a breakfast place on Peoria Avenue in Brookside where we used to go, the coffee shop where we'd had our first date, which had become ours in the way that first date places sometimes do, the accumulated meaning of returning somewhere where a thing began. I drove past it last week on my way home from an early shift, and I sat in my car in the lot for about 5 minutes before I went in and ordered coffee and sat at a table that wasn't the table we usually sat at, because I wasn't ready for that table yet. And I drank the coffee and watched Peoria Avenue and got through the hour. I still reach for my phone to text her when something happens at work that she would have found interesting. I've caught myself doing it 4 times. Each time I get as far as opening the message thread, and then I close it, and the reflex is still there the next day, and eventually it will stop. I've been told by people who've been through things like this that the reflex is usually the last thing to go, that the habit of a person outlasts the person in the space, and that the outlasting is its own particular grief. I believe them. I'm in it. The ER doesn't stop for personal situations. I've been back on shift for 2 weeks, and I'm functional. Not my best, but functional. And the work helps in the specific way that work with high stakes helps, which is that it requires your full attention, and there are long stretches of a shift where the only thing you're doing is the job. Marcus has been on the same rotation, and he covers for me in the small ways that need covering and doesn't make it into a thing. I've started to appreciate the night drives home differently. The Broken Arrow Expressway at 6 in the morning, the flat Oklahoma sky coming up, the particular quality of the light before the city fully wakes. I've been taking the long way sometimes. Not for any particular reason. Just because the drive is something I can be present in without it requiring me to be anywhere else. And some mornings that's exactly the right amount to ask of myself. Here is where I actually am. Serena and I have spoken 5 times since she went to Kelsey's. 3 of those were logistics. One was a harder conversation, about 10 days in, where she said things about the relationship that I've been going through carefully since, about the boxes, about the shelf of unaddressed things, about the specific quality of being with someone who could hold their emergency together under any circumstance, and who could not quite do the same for the ordinary ongoing emergencies of a shared life. She didn't say it to justify what she'd done. She said it clearly as a separate thing. I've been trying to honor that separation. The 5th conversation was 3 days ago. She asked if I would be willing to speak with someone together, a counselor, a mediator, some kind of structured conversation that wasn't 2 people in an apartment trying to hold a lot of things at once without any container for them. She said she wasn't asking for a particular outcome. She said she'd been honest with me, and she was going to keep being honest, and that whatever I decided she'd respect. I told her I was thinking about it. That's the true answer. I'm thinking about it. I haven't said yes, and I haven't said no, and I'm trying not to make that a box I'm shelving rather than a question I'm actually sitting with. I started seeing a therapist 3 weeks ago. Her name is Dr. Lino Ochoa, and she has an office on Cherry Street, and she is, specifically, excellent at catching the box and shelf thing in real time. She catches it approximately once per session, in a way that's uncomfortable and precisely calibrated. She said in our second appointment something that I've been carrying. Emergency medicine teaches you to manage the acute phase. What you're in now is not the acute phase. The acute phase was the GPS pin. What's left is the chronic work, and chronic work requires different tools than the ones that got you through the night. I've been thinking about that distinction a lot. Acute versus chronic. The tools for each. The apartment on Denver Avenue is quieter than it was. I've started leaving the radio on in the evenings, which I never used to do, because the particular quality of silence that a space has after someone has been in it and isn't anymore is its own thing, and I'm not always ready for it at the end of a shift. The radio plays whatever it plays. It doesn't require anything from me. Some evenings that's the right amount of company. The cardigan is still on the hook by the door. I'll deal with it eventually. Right now it's just a cardigan on a hook, and the apartment is still figuring out what it is without her in it. And I'm giving it, and myself, a little more time. I set up Find My Friends so we could find each other if something happened, and it worked exactly as designed. And I've been thinking ever since about what it means that the thing that found her was also the thing that lost her, and I don't have an answer to that yet. But I've stopped putting it in a box, and I think that's the right direction. Tomorrow, a man receives a voicemail from a number he doesn't recognize. A woman leaving a message she clearly meant for someone else, and the name she says at the end of it is his wife's.